for is, think about if you're drinking wine, you just start gulping it down your throat. No, you're supposed to kind of smell it and take in the aroma and all that stuff and savor it before you start sipping it. So this is kind of that part of the museum tour. I really like this cool time-lapse video. It's only about a minute long, but it shows how the museum was constructed and has a really distinctive design on the National Mall. So let me cue this up and I'll show you how the museum was built in 60 seconds. So again, just a very distinctive design. I'm guessing that most of you, or maybe even all of you, have seen the outside of the building, at least pictures of it, just because it is so distinctive. It really stands out on the other comparison with the other structures on the National Mall. Here's outside view. And I thought what I was initially going to do is talk about the museum and the design and the architecture, but then I thought, you know what, let the experts do that. So this is another short video clip. I think this one's only like a couple minutes long. It's the architect and the designer of the museum, and I'm going to let them tell you about what they were thinking when they designed and built the structure.
We felt the weight just about every day because we knew that we were building something not for the next 10 years, but the next 100 years that would represent our culture.
The museum really is not just about making any shape just for the sake of it. It really tries to make, from the very silhouette, a story for people to ask why. And it really tries to bring you back to Central and West Africa. So you think about the kind of empires of that time and the history that the African American community have, but also that the geometry, like coming to America, defers to the monument of Washington, the 17.5 degrees, to show how it's integral. Even though it's from a different place, it's part of the same place. It's part of this place, America. We wanted a building that wasn't just constantly reflecting the light in the way that stone does, but we wanted something that would really be alive with the light, be more organic. And in a way, what it does is it really talks about the spectrum of the sort of dark presence in America, the dark presence on the mall. From bright to light. When it's a beautiful sunny day like this, it seems like the building is sometimes on fire. It's golden and sort of a flame. And then on a dull day, it's quiet, it's subtle, but it's almost black. And you kind of think it's black, and then you look and you see that it's got glints of brown and it shimmers. And we think that that's about a really nice metaphor for the community. It's very diverse.
At night, the building takes on another character as light is emanating from it as opposed to being reflected from the sun. The site is really important. If you think about the mall and the other buildings that are important to Washington, this 5-acre site is the very last site that could accommodate something like this. So in many ways, it's going to be there as a reminder of the importance of this institution because of its location, literally within the shadow of the Washington Monument.
It's taken 200 years to complete this master plan. And last but not least, I think this museum completes it, makes you understand the sort of what the founding fathers were trying to achieve with this notion of palaces of culture to educate the people. And I think this museum comes at a very opportune time to finish this master plan and to send it into the future.
I also wanted to show you this video because the architect, the gentleman on the left, Philip Freelon, he actually passed away in the summer of 2019. So this was kind of ended up being like the culmination of his excellent career that he had. He designed numerous well-known buildings, but he did pass away a little more than a year and a half ago. So I wanted to make sure you got to see what he looked like and hear him in his own words. So let's continue on. And again, just a very distinctive building design. And as they were talking about in the video, it looks different depending on what time of day or what season it is in the year when you walk around, pass through here. So again, we'll go inside and look at some of the stuff in just a minute. But before we do, I wanted to show you the exterior of it. This is the metal work that's on the outside, but this is the view of it from the inside of the museum, just so you can see how distinctive it is. And one thing, I'm probably a museum nerd, but I always like to go to museums and kind of see what people are stopping to look at or taking pictures of and whatnot. And this metal work is really intriguing, and I notice other people share the same opinion, because you frequently see people stop at this point just taking pictures of this part of the museum, which is kind of unusual, because if you think about museum buildings, like if you were to say go to the Smithsonian American History Museum, you don't really see people taking pictures of just regular parts of the building. They usually just save their photos for some object, historical object that's in the collection, but not so much here. So that's really interesting. Here's a close-up. Hold on for 1 second. Okay, if you want to make the slides that I'm showing bigger, click on view or view options, which is usually at the top of your computer session, and you can adjust that at your own end. I'm showing the slides at full screen where I'm at, but they may not be showing up in full screen mode depending on where you're located at, so FYI. And I just wanted to include this. So our Facebook page, Washington, D.C. History and Culture, we post a lot of different things throughout the year. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is like the most popular photograph we've ever posted on our Facebook page. We posted a few times. And every time we do, it just gets a huge amount of comments and likes and shares. And you may have seen this photo before because it's so well known. But the connection it has with our program today is this was actually taken at the dedication, or sorry, not the dedication, the opening of the Smithsonian Museum. So President Bush was on hand because he was the person who signed into law the act that made the museum possible. And then the Obamas were living in the White House when the museum officially opened. So just kind of a cute photo. So if you've seen this before, which I'm guessing a lot of you probably have, I just wanted to show you the context of it. It was actually at the opening of the Smithsonian Museum. And speaking of opening, here it is. So it was a great honor to be there on this particular weekend, September 2016. There's a picture from Jessica, our co-host for today. And of course, as you can imagine, there were a lot of people there. And for myself personally, I've been either coming to or living in Washington, D.C. off and on for 20 years. And I can't think of anything that opened in DC that had as much anticipation as this museum did. I think partially because it was long overdue. I think also partially because they knew it was the Smithsonian. It was going to be well done, and it's gotten a lot of press coverage and stuff like that. But I really can't think of anything that stands out in DC that was as much anticipated as this opening was. Jessica, I don't know if you have any kind of comparisons, but just head and shoulders above everything else. And there's been quite a bit of stuff, suffice to say, that's opened in Washington, D.C. during the past 20 years. A lot of other museums and monuments and stuff like that, but this one really stood out. And this is a little bit later. So just FYI, it's going to be a little bit hard to talk about like the logistics of visiting the museum because everything's kind of up in the air with COVID. But traditionally, the museum has not had regularly scheduled tours per se. Like for instance, some of the other Smithsonians, you can show up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday and get like an overview tour of the museum. Because the museum has been so crowded since it opened, because of staffing limitations, they have not had regularly scheduled tours. They've had them periodically or sometimes when you show up, you might find out that there's something taking place that day. So what our organization was doing is we were conducting tours, not all the time, but periodically. And so this is one of our tour groups visiting the museum, and we're going to go inside and check stuff out. And the museum is highly rated on TripAdvisor, so if you get a chance, you should check that out. And just a couple of tips. So this is mostly like a history type presentation, but I did want to make it a little bit like a travel type presentation as well, and just kind of give you some tips or suggestions. One suggestion I have is if you're going to be visiting the museum, if you order the official guidebook before you show up, you can spend time kind of learning about some of the items that you're going to be seeing in the building itself and its mission and the history and stuff like that. If you don't get a chance to do this, or you don't like to read books, that's totally fine. It's definitely not required, but I think in my opinion, you'll have much more of a impactful experience if you're able to get this book beforehand. It's really well done. It's not very expensive. It comes from the Smithsonian, but it's their guidebook. You can buy it on their website or Amazon. So I recommend that. And then as far as tickets go, it has been traditionally a challenge to get tickets into the museum. They're free, but they can only allow so many people in at a given time, and so they usually run out pretty quickly. Now, the ticketing situation is all up in the air with COVID. Who knows what it's going to be like when things get back to normal. I'd be happy to give you some suggestions on how to get tickets easier, because I have learned a few things along the way, but I don't want to tell you that stuff because it could possibly easily change when COVID. So we'll revisit the issue once the museum opens back up. And one thing I like about visiting here is you just see a lot of happy people. And so obviously some of the content of the museum exhibits, particularly centered around like slavery and Jim Crow and stuff like that, is very disturbing. But suffice to say, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of inspirational and makes people happy, and much more so here than a regular museum like an art museum or some other type of venue like that. You just see a lot of happy people walking around. They're just excited to be here. They're enjoying the exhibits and the programs and stuff like that. So it really sticks out in my mind. Now let's do this. Let's just do two real short, quick videos before we go inside the museum and look at the stuff there. And this is the museum's founding director, Lonnie Bunch. And I'm going to let him just give you like a quick overview of the museum, just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page as far as what's the purpose of the museum and what we're going to be looking at, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just two really short videos from Lonnie Bunch, a gentleman that I greatly admire.
It's hard for me to remember, but 11 years ago, we really did start this with a staff of 2, with, as David said, no collections at all. We really had even no idea exactly where the site of the museum would be. All we knew is that we had a vision that we wanted to help all who encountered the museum to remember the rich history of the African American. But we also thought, while America should ponder the pain of slavery and segregation, it also had to find the joy, the hope, the resiliency, the spirituality that was endemic in this community.
Okay, that's one. And then I have one other short one, and then we'll go inside. Oh, hold on a second.
In some ways, the job of this newest museum is to help the public embrace ambiguity and complexity, not to give simple answers to complex questions, but to say that the ambiguity of race, the ambiguity of the African American experience is where the learning is, it's where the biggest challenge is. And part of the joy of this is recognizing that we're asking the Smithsonian to do something it's not very comfortable doing. In many of the places in the Smithsonian, the job is to commemorate and celebrate. The job is to bring closure. But the job of this museum is to only bring closure by opening it up, by helping people wrestle with things that are very difficult. And so what I want is for the public to know that this is not going to be a place that's always going to poke at you or prod or tell the difficult stories. You will find the joy that is in this community. You will find those moments where you can tap your toes, those moments where you'll laugh. But the most important thing that this new museum should do is it should make America better. And the only way you can make America better is by illuminating all the dark corners and having candid conversations around difficult issues. And that is the strength of this new museum.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie Bunch. So, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, A People's Journey, A Nation's Story. So let's go